Story 1. ER Military Nurse. I've worked emergency intake at Fort Harrow Military Medical for 9 years. You learn to compartmentalize fast in a place like this. Gunshot wounds, training accidents, explosions from overseas deployments. Men and women barely old enough to drink, being wheeled in under fluorescent lights that don't blink no matter how much you wish they would. You can't let it stick to you. You triage, you stabilize, you chart, you move on. That's the rule. But some patients don't move on. And sometimes, they don't leave. It was 0217 hours when they brought him in. Male mid-20s. Combat engineer. IED detonation during training exercise. He wasn't breathing when the ambulance doors opened. Oh, we worked him for 37 minutes. 37, that's longer than protocol prefers when injuries look like that. But this is a military hospital. You don't stop early. You fight for every one of them, even when you already know. At 0254, the attending physician called it, time of death 0254 hours. I remember because I wrote it, because the second hand on the trauma bay clock stuttered when he said it, just once. I always noticed small things. We moved him to curtain 3. The morgue team was backed up that night. Transport delay, so he stayed. I finished the paperwork, tagged his belongings, logged his service number, routine. But when I went back to check the curtain before shift change, it was half open, not wide. Just enough that I could see the outline of the gurney. I closed it. No breeze, no vent draft. I told myself someone brushed it passing by. At 0338, the call button chimed. Curtain 3. I stared at the board. It lit up red. Bed 3 assistance required. I didn't move at first. It had to be malfunctioning. Sometimes the wiring in the older trauma bays shorted after heavy equipment use. I walked over. The curtain was closed. Completely. I pulled it aside. It was exactly how we left him. Still, sheet pulled to his chest. No movement. The call button cord lay across his hand. Not under. Across. I distinctly remember placing it on the side rail. I moved it again, hung it higher this time. Then I reset the board. At 0412, his vitals monitor turned on. No one had powered it. The screen flickered from black to green lines. Flatline at first. Then a single blip, not a spike, pulse. Just one. Then flat again. I froze in the doorway. We don't make mistakes like that. Equipment doesn't activate without input. I stepped closer. The monitor beeped once. A hollow tone. The kind you hear when something reconnects. Stop, I muttered. The screen went dark. I stood there for a full minute. Then I unplugged it entirely. Cord removed from wall. No power. That should have been the end of it. At 0506, I heard boots. Slow. Measured. Crossing the ER hallway. We don't get visitors at that hour, especially not in trauma. I stepped out from the nurse's station. The hallway was empty, but the sound continued. It's not echoing. Approaching. It stopped outside curtain 3. I felt it before I saw it. That prickle along your shoulders when someone is standing too close behind you. I turned. The curtain moved. Not from the bottom. From the center. As if something inside shifted its weight. I pulled it open hard enough that the ring scraped metal. He was still. Exactly as before. But the sheet, it was lower. Exposing more of his chest. I hadn't done that. I know I hadn't. His dog tags rested against his collarbone now. They hadn't before. They'd been tucked beneath the sheet. I stepped backward. Transport is delayed, I whispered, though I don't know why I said it. As if explaining it mattered. The dog tags clicked softly against each other. There was no airflow, no one near them. It just moved. Shift change came at 0600. I didn't mention it. In military medicine, you don't report feelings, report facts, and I had none. But the transport team logged that when they arrived at 0623, curtain 3 was already open. Fully, they assumed we'd left it that way. I didn't correct them. The next night, I was assigned to the same bay rotation. We don't choose our stations. Chain of command assigns. At 0148, the ambulance doors opened again. Another training accident. Different soldier. Different injuries. But when they rolled the gurney in, they placed him in bay 3. The same bay. Same curtain. I felt something twist inside my chest. This patient survived. Barely. He was unconscious, but stable enough for surgery. As we transferred him upstairs, I noticed something. On the trauma clock, 254. The seconds hand stuttered. Just once. Same as the night before. I didn't say anything. 3 nights later, I was alone in the intake corridor finishing chart audits. The lights in Bay 3 flickered. Short burst. I looked up. The bay was empty. No patient, no equipment running. Walked toward it. The curtain was swaying. Not wildly, just a gentle forward and back. I reached out and caught it. The fabric was warm, not room temperature. Warm, like someone had just brushed past it. Behind me, the call board chimed. Bed 3 assistance required. I didn't turn around this time. I walked directly into the bay. Your transport already came, I said quietly. The air pressure changed. That's the only way I can describe it. Like stepping into a sealed room, the heart monitor powered on again. Unplugged. Blank screen, then green lines. A steady rhythm, 72 beats per minute. Normal. I felt my throat tighten. I can't fix what happened, I said. The rhythm slowed. 68, 69, 70. I wasn't there, I whispered. The curtain behind me closed. Not gently, firmly. Sealing the bay, I spun around. There was no one. I wasn't alone. You know how I know? Because the smell changed. Metal, dust, burned wiring, IED, blast residue. It smelled it enough times in trauma intake to recognize it instantly. It filled the bay. The dog tags weren't on the gurney. They were hanging from the IV pole, swaying. Slowly I reached for them. They were cold, ice cold, not warm like before, and etched into the metal. Not his name, not his service number. 254, I dropped them. They hit the tile, but the sound echoed too long, like the room was bigger than it was. The monitor screamed. Not flatline, just one continuous tone. The overhead lights shut off. Emergency red backup lights flickered on. I couldn't see the doorway. I couldn't see the curtain, which is red illumination in the shape of the gurney. And for 1 second I saw him, standing beside it. Not injured, not burned, uniform intact, face expressionless, looking at me. Not angry, not accusing, just waiting. The red lights flickered out. When they came back on, he was gone. The dog tags were back around his neck, under the sheet, exactly where we'd left them that first night. The monitor was dark, unplugged. The curtain open. Normal lighting restored. I was alone. I filed no report. What would I say? Deceased soldier returned to his assigned bay? No. Military hospitals don't process that kind of paperwork. But Bay 3 hasn't been reassigned for trauma intake since. Administration claims it's for equipment maintenance. They replaced the wiring, the monitors, the curtain track, even the clock. The new clock doesn't stutter. But every so often, at exactly 0254, the call board lights up red. Bed 3 assistance required. No patient assigned, no power surge, no malfunction logged, just a request. And if I walk to the bay, the curtain is always half open, like someone is waiting for discharge. And sometimes, if I stand there long enough, I hear boots. Measured. Approaching. Stopping right behind me. I still work intake. I still compartmentalize. But I don't assign anyone to Bay 3 after midnight. Because some patients don't leave. Some aren't discharged. And in a military hospital, even the dead wait for orders. Story 2. The hospital wing they closed. I've worked custodial night rotation at Fort Harrow Military Medical for 11 years. People think janitors don't notice things, that we just mop floors and empty bins. But when you work nights in a military hospital, you learn the rhythm of the building. You know which vents rattle, which lights flicker, which hallway doors stick. Hospitals have patterns, and when those patterns change, you feel it. They reassigned me to Surgical Wing C after it was temporarily closed. That's what the memo said. Temporary. The official reason was structural upgrades and air filtration repairs. But they moved everything out too fast for renovations. Equipment stripped, operating rooms emptied, patient files relocated, and security access limited to maintenance and sanitation only, which meant me. Wing C had been the trauma overflow wing. Combat cases mostly, explosives, shrapnel. High mortality. You shut it down 3 days after a mass casualty training incident. That's all anyone would say. Training incident, My shift started at 23 o'clock hours. The wing lights were dimmed to half power. Long, sterile corridors. Closed operating suites, empty recovery bays. You'd think silence would make it easier. It didn't. Hospitals don't go silent. Even unused ones hum. Ventilation, electrical current, distant elevator motors. Wing C didn't hum. It felt paused, like someone had pressed stop. First night was normal. Dust accumulation in corners. Metal surfaces cold. Mop bucket wheels squeaking louder than usual in the emptiness. I finished by 0200, signed off. No issues. Second night, the supply closet door was open. I always check it at the start of shift. It had been locked. The keycard log later showed only my entry. I told myself I misremembered. Closed it, continued. Around 0030, I heard a gurney wheel roll. That hollow rubber vibration against tile. I stepped into the corridor. There was no gurney in sight. Wing C's equipment had been removed. All of it. The sound stopped, then started again, from farther down the hall. Slow, measured, like someone walking beside it. I followed. The sound retreated. Not fading, retreating. I turned the corner into operating room C4. The door was open. Inside, the surgical table stood alone under dim, overhead lighting. The instrument trays had been removed weeks ago. The room was empty, except the surgical lamp above the table was swaying. Not wildly, just enough to creak. Back and forth was no airflow. Ventilation had been powered down in that wing. I stood there longer than I should have. Waiting for it to stop, it didn't. I left. Third night is when it started touching things. My mop bucket was beside me in the hallway while I scrubbed near. Operating room C2. When I reached back for it, it wasn't there. It stood 10 feet behind me, centered in the corridor, perfectly aligned, like someone had rolled it there carefully. I stared at the wheels. They weren't wet, which meant they hadn't moved through the water I'd spilled. They were dry, like they'd been lifted. I told myself I must have nudged it without realizing. I resumed cleaning. A minute later, the wringer handle snapped downward on its own. Hard water splashed across the tile. The metal lever vibrated like it had been struck. No one was there. I was alone in a sealed wing. I shut off the overhead lights and left early that night. First time in 11 years, I cut a shift short. Administration called me in the next morning. Asked if I'd observed structural irregularities. Strange wording, not unusual activity. Structural irregularities. I said no. Because I needed the job. Because military hospitals don't entertain superstition. They investigate weakness. Night 4. I told myself it was faulty hydraulics. Old metal. Building settling. You rationalize until you can't. Around 0115, I entered recovery base 6. Rows of empty bed frames. Privacy curtains tied back. IV poles lined along the wall. Everything in place. Everything unused. I began wiping down surfaces. That's when the first IV pole fell. It didn't tip. It launched sideways, clanged against the wall, echoed down the corridor. I froze. Another pole fell. Opposite side, then another. One by one, alternating left and right. Like footsteps. Approaching. I backed toward the doorway. The poles stopped. The silence returned. Then every privacy curtain in the bay snapped closed at once, not drifting, not swaying. Snapped, as if yanked by invisible hands. The temperature dropped instantly. I could see my breath. Wing C's climate. Control had been disabled weeks ago. There was no reason for cold air. The curtain in front of me trembled, then bulged inward, as though someone stood behind it, breathing. The shape wasn't human. Too broad at the shoulders, too narrow at the waist. Distorted, I took a step back. The curtain rods screeched as every divider in the room began sliding violently along their tracks. Metal against metal, shrill, uncontrolled. The IV poles lifted, not tipped, lifted 6 inches off the ground, then dropped simultaneously. The crash was deafening. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. I just ran. The corridor lights flickered as I sprinted. Operating room doors slammed shut ahead of me, one after another. Like the wing ceiling itself, my mop bucket rolled past me against gravity. up the slight incline toward the main corridor. No one pushed it. It moved with purpose. Stopped in front of the double doors leading out. Blocking them, I grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge. It felt anchored. Behind me, the gurney wheels again. Closer this time. Heavy. Metal frame rattling. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The sound was right behind me. Breathing filled the corridor. Low. Mechanical. Like air forced through damaged lungs. Pulled harder on the bucket. The handle twisted in my hands. The metal bent, then snapped. The bucket shot backward 20 feet, slamming into the wall. The double doors burst open. I stumbled through them into the lit main hospital corridor. The doors slammed shut behind me, hard enough to shake the hinges. Silence, immediate. Wing C lights returned to steady glow. Nothing moved. Security reviewed the footage. They called it electrical malfunction. There were gaps in the recording, static, distortion. Every time something moved, the feed cut out for 2 seconds. 2 seconds is a long time when heavy objects relocate. Administration closed Wing C permanently after that. It's not temporary anymore. Permanent. They installed new locks, restricted access, no night sanitation assigned. They outsourced it to a daytime contractor. But here's what they didn't account for. Still carried the key card. They never deactivated it. And last week at exactly 0115, I heard gurney wheels outside my supply closet. On an active wing, nowhere near C I stepped into the corridor. Nothing. But my mop bucket was centered in the hallway. Perfectly aligned. Dry wheels, no water trail, like it had been placed there, waiting. And somewhere in the building, metal rattled, slow, measured, like something still moving down a corridor that was supposed to be empty. Wing C is closed. But whatever started there, it wasn't contained. It doesn't need the room. It just needs the building. And I've stopped telling myself it's settling metal, because metal doesn't breathe, and it doesn't follow you. Story 3. It never triggered the sensors. I've worked hospital security for 13 years. Before that, I was infantry. 2 tours overseas. I don't scare easily. We see enough in combat, the brain rewires. Loud noises don't spike your pulse. Shadows don't mean anything. But cameras don't lie. That's what I used to believe. Fort Harrow military medical runs on layered surveillance. Every entrance badge scanned. Every corridor monitored. Motion sensors in restricted wings. Thermal cameras in stairwells. You don't move through that building without leaving a trace. That's the point. Except something did. It never triggered a single sensor. It started small. 2 36 hours. Routine, overnight monitoring. 3 of us in the security office rotating camera checks. A feed cycle automatically, but I prefer manual sweep. Catch more that way? I was reviewing Corridor B7, transitional hallway between active ER and decommissioned wing. See that hallway stays empty at night. Too far from patient traffic. Too close to the closed wing. 8. On camera, I saw a figure at the far end. Standing still. No badge access registered. No door activity. Just there. It was shaped like a person. Uniform silhouette, hands at sides, facing the camera. I leaned forward. "Who's in B7?" I asked. The other guards checked access logs. No entries, no motion detection triggered. I zoomed in. The feed glitched, just slightly, not static. More like compression distortion around the edges of the figure. When the image sharpened again, the hallway was empty. No doors had opened, no footsteps in adjacent feeds, just gone. We marked it as a video artifact, electrical interference. Military facilities are notorious for signal noise. I signed off on it. 2 nights later, it appeared again. Same hallway, same time frame, 2:30 to 2:45 window. This time, closer to the center of the corridor, facing the opposite direction. Toward Wing C, I pulled up thermal overlay. Nothing. The hallway temperature read uniform. No heat signature. That's impossible. Even a person standing still emits heat. I toggled back to standard feed. The figure remained. I radioed for a physical sweep. 2 guards walked B7 from both ends. The figure didn't move, didn't react. The guards reported empty corridor. On camera, I watched them walk past it. Through it, not like smoke, not transparent. It simply wasn't there for them, but it was on my screen. When they cleared the hallway, the figure rotated, slowly, to face the camera again, and stepped forward. One step. The feed froze. Time stalled for 3 seconds. When it resumed, empty hallway. No log entries. No door alarms, no sensor activation. I began reviewing archived footage. Pattern recognition. That's how you approach unknown variables. You find repetition. And I did. The figure first appeared 3 days after Wing C permanently closed. It never showed before that. It never entered through exterior doors. It never used stairwells. It simply manifested inside interior corridors. Always between 2:30 and 3 o'clock. Always near decommissioned zones. Always facing a camera, like it knew where they were. That bothered me more than anything. Cameras in that building aren't obvious. They're recessed, discreet. You don't casually orient toward them, unless you're aware. On the 8th sighting, it moved floors. Level 3 surgical recovery. Active wing. Patients sleeping, staff minimal. I caught it mid-hallway, near room 317, standing beside a door. The room belonged to a soldier recovering from blast trauma. I pulled the live room feed. The patient lay still, vitals stable, no anomalies. Back to corridor camera. The figure was closer to the door now. Head tilted slightly. Not natural tilt. Too precise. It's like listening. I radioed floor security again. They approached. On camera, I watched them move toward it. As they passed, the overhead lights dimmed. Just that section of hallway, not a full power fluctuation. Localized. The guards reported nothing. No visual contact. When they reached the patient's room, the cardiac monitor spiked. Just once, then normalized. The figure was gone. But something changed that night. The patient coded at 2:54. Sudden arrhythmia. Unexplained. Resuscitation failed. Time of death, 2:54. I stared at that number in the report longer than I should have. Because Wing C's last incident report logged a 54 as well. I stopped telling the other guards what I saw. I started calling it camera fatigue. Long shifts distort perception, maybe. But fatigue doesn't create timestamps. It doesn't erase thermal signatures. It doesn't correlate with patient deaths. The entity began appearing in the security stairwell feeds next. That's when I realized something else. It didn't use doors. It didn't travel logically. It appeared wherever cameras existed. Not where people walked, where cameras watched. As if its movement path wasn't physical, but observational. Like it moved through sightlines. If no camera covered a hallway, it never appeared there. But the moment one was installed, it would show up within days. Standing at the edge of frame, testing visibility. I ran an experiment. At 2:20, I manually disabled corridor B7's camera feed. Power cut locally. No recording, no live stream. Just darkness. We waited. 2:36 passed. Nothing. No anomaly on adjacent feeds. At 2:48, I restored power. The camera flickered back online. It was already there, standing directly beneath the lens. Closer than ever before. Face angled upward. I zoomed in. Features were indistinct, not blurred, just undefined. Like resolution refused to render detail, but the posture rigid, attentive, aware. It lifted its head incrementally. Not toward the lens, toward me. That sounds irrational, but I felt it. Like the distance between camera and observer had collapsed. The feed glitched. But this time, instead of disappearing, it stepped forward, toward the camera. The image filled with dark static, and cut entirely. The monitor went black, not just the feed. The entire display. All screens in the security office shut off simultaneously. Emergency backup kicked in after 6 seconds. 6 long seconds in darkness. When the system rebooted, all cameras resumed normally. No figure, no power surge recorded. No system fault, just blank gap in recording. Timestamp skipped from 0249 to 0255. 6 minutes missing, not 6 seconds. 6 minutes we were sitting there the whole time. We didn't move, didn't lose consciousness. But the system log showed a 6-minute discontinuity. And none of us remembered anything inside that window. The final encounter wasn't on camera. That's how I knew it had escalated. I was doing a physical patrol near the decommissioned Wing C access point. Doors sealed, badge restricted. I stood in the corridor alone. 234 hours. The overhead light flickered once. I felt the temperature drop. Not drastically, it's just enough to notice. Behind me, footsteps. Measured. Boots on tile. I turned. No one. I checked the nearest camera bubble. Red indicator light was off. Disabled, manually. But I hadn't touched it. I radioed the office. They confirmed feed was down. Signal interference, no cause identified. The hallway grew quieter, not silent, muted, like sound was being absorbed. I felt watched, not from behind, from everywhere. Every reflective surface. Door, windows, metal railings, polished tile. I saw it in the reflection first, not directly. Shape standing behind me, closer than it had ever been on camera. I didn't turn. I watched it through the metal panel reflection. Tall, uniform silhouette, head slightly tilted, and the posture was identical to what I'd seen on monitors. I swallowed. "If you're here," I said quietly, "you're not authorized." The reflection shifted, not walking, gliding, until it stood directly behind me. I felt cold along my spine, like breath against fabric. Then nothing. The hallway lights returned to full brightness. The ambient hospital hum resumed. Camera indicator light blinked red again. Operational, I turned. Empty corridor. But the access door to Wing C, which requires dual authentication and admin override, was slightly ajar. Not open, just unsealed. Enough to show darkness beyond. No badge log, no alarm, just open. I didn't go inside. I closed it, logged the irregularity, marked it as mechanical failure, because what else could I write? Entity testing surveillance perimeter. Military reports don't allow that vocabulary. The sighting stopped after that. No more figures on camera, no more glitches, no more timestamp gaps. Everything returned to routine. But last week, administration installed new cameras in the ambulance bay. Upgraded system. Higher resolution. Thermal integrated. The first night they went live at 0236, a figure appeared at the edge of frame, standing beside the rear doors of an ambulance, facing the camera. Not moving, just waiting. And this time, the thermal overlay registered something, not heat. Absence. A cold void where a body should have been. Like the sensor couldn't read through it. The timestamp didn't glitch. The feed didn't cut. It stayed. For exactly 6 minutes. Then stepped backward. Into the shadow beneath the loading canopy. And vanished. No door access. No alarm. No motion detection. Still no sensor trigger. It never trips the system. It only uses it. It moves where we watch. It appears where we observe. I've stopped believing cameras don't lie, because whatever this is, it wants to be seen. And it wants to know who's watching. Story 4. I closed the incision. I have logged 1,143 surgeries in military service. Every procedure documented, every outcome reviewed, every deviation examined. In military medicine, mistakes are dissected long after the body is not. You are trained to believe in data, not in lingering things. Captain Elias Morano died at 2:54 hours. And something about that time never left operating room 4. He was 26. Blast trauma during a controlled demolition exercise. Internal hemorrhage, lung collapse, fragment migration. We prepped him at 2:11. He looked at me before anesthesia took hold. "I'll be fine, sir." They always say that. The procedure was controlled for the first 40 minutes. Bleeding identified, clamped, stabilized. Then his blood pressure collapsed. No visible, catastrophic rupture. No obvious missed vessel. Just systemic shutdown. We worked him 31 minutes past expectation. At 2:54, I called it. Time of death, 2:54. I closed the incision myself. I prefer control at the end. You don't leave a soldier open on a table. You finish the procedure, even when it's no longer a procedure. 3 days later, I was back in OR 4. Different patient. Routine repair. At 2:54, the surgical light dimmed. Not flickered. Dimmed. The heart monitor emitted a single flat tone before resuming normal rhythm. Vitals remained stable. No clinical explanation. The wall clock hesitated at 2:54. then continued. I said nothing. Hospitals experience electrical irregularities. That is what I told myself. When I removed my gloves, I found a smear of dried blood on the stainless tray beside me. Dark, old. We had full suction containment. There was no splatter. I wiped it away. The disturbances became precise. Instruments rotated exactly 180 degrees from their original alignment. Scalpels repositioned, not dropped, not disturbed. Adjusted, as if examined by someone who understood surgical order. At 2:54 each night, something shifted. A light dimmed. A monitor blinked. A metal tray vibrated lightly against its bracket. Never violent, never chaotic, deliberate. The first time I saw him, it was in reflection. OR4. 2:53 hours. The temperature dropped slightly. Not dramatically, just enough to notice when I touched the steel counter. 2:54. The overhead light narrowed. The surgical table across the room, empty, developed an indentation. Gradual, like weight settling into padding. I stepped closer. The indentation deepened, arms at sides. Exact position from the night I closed his incision. In the reflection of the surgical lamp behind me, he stood. Uniform intact. No blast injuries, no blood, just present. Watching, I turned. The room was empty. Back to reflection. Still there. Not angry, not accusing. Waiting. You died on my table, I said quietly. The monitor emitted a single flat tone. The indentation deepened further. Cold radiated from the table's surface. Clinical cold, operating room cold. I blinked. The light returned to full intensity. The table was empty, the reflection clear. Time, 2:55. I reviewed the autopsy report again that week. Blast-induced vascular collapse. Unavoidable. No surgical error. But something in me resisted that conclusion. The next incident occurred mid-procedure. A vascular repair. Complicated, but manageable. As I adjusted my angle, I felt pressure at my elbow. Subtle. Guiding, not pushing. Correcting, I stiffened. No one stood beside me. My assistant remained across the table. The incision line I'd just made was cleaner than intended. More precise? I did not acknowledge it. I finished the procedure. The clock read 2:56. The pattern intensified during another late-night surgery. Mass casualty drill complications. 2 are active. I was assigned OR4 again. The patient was critical, but viable. We worked quickly. At 2:53, the overhead light dimmed. 2:54, every monitor in the room went black simultaneously, not the patient's vitals, the screens themselves. The surgical lamp narrowed its beam to the incision. The rest of the room darkened. I heard breathing behind me, measured, steady, the same cadence from the night he coded. I did everything correctly, I said without turning. Silence. Then, understanding, not sound, but comprehension. You closed too soon. The surgical table felt occupied twice, the living patient, and something layered beneath him. My hands met resistance beneath the padding, as if another presence pressed upward through the table. The incision began bleeding from a secondary point I had not yet addressed. Subtle, hidden. I extended the opening, found it. A concealed vascular tear, slow, fatal if left unattended. I clamped and repaired. The bleeding stopped. The lights returned to full strength. The monitors reactivated. One screen remained active during the blackout, displaying a heart rhythm, archived, time-stamped, 2:54, the night he died. Then it vanished. Time, 2:56. The patient survived. After that, the disturbances ceased. No more dimmed lights, no more reflections, no more cold guidance at my elbow. But I changed my approach. When complications arise now, I extend procedures longer than protocol suggests. I reopen closures I once trusted. I look twice. At 2:54, I pause. Not in fear, in acknowledgement. 2 weeks after the blackout incident, another vascular complication presented. Textbook closure would have sufficed. Instead, I reopened. Extended by 9 minutes. Found a hidden secondary bleed. Corrected it. Stabilized the patient. Time of stabilization, 2:54. That night, there was no cold air, no dimmed light, No reflection behind me, just silence. When I removed my gloves, I noticed something on the tray. A faint smear of dried blood, not fresh, not from that surgery, dark, oxidized. I did not wipe it away. Some lessons in a military hospital remain on duty, even after the body is discharged. Story 5. The ride back wasn't empty. I've driven military ambulances for 8 years. Stateside, overseas, training accidents, combat simulations. You'll learn one rule fast. You don't look in the rear compartment longer than necessary. You focus on the road. Let the medic handle what's behind you. Because once those doors close and you start moving, what's in the back becomes your responsibility to deliver, alive or not. The call came in at 2:18. Controlled demolition training exercise gone wrong. Single casualty, unresponsive. We arrived within 6 minutes. The soldier was already on a stretcher when we reached him. CPR in progress. Chest compression rhythm steady. No pulse detected. We loaded him. Doors shut. Pulled away toward Fort Harrow Military Medical. Sirens on, road empty. The medic in back continued compressions. Still no rhythm, he called forward. Halfway to the hospital, I heard a thud. Heavy. From inside the rear compartment, not equipment shift, not normal transport movement. A body shifting against restraints? Straps secure? I asked. Yeah, the medic answered, and quieter. Hold on. The radio crackled with static. I adjusted the volume. Signal distortion happens near the base perimeter. But this wasn't external interference. It was internal. The sound was coming from behind me. Metal rattled. The stretcher rail vibrated hard enough that I felt it through the chassis. Then silence? Status? I asked. No response. Status, I repeated. The medic's voice came back strained. Straps just tightened. What? They tightened on their own. I glanced at the rearview mirror. You're not supposed to watch while driving code, but I did. For a split second, I saw the stretcher shift, not bounce. Shift sideways, against its locking track. I looked back to the road. The steering wheel pulled slightly left. Not mechanical failure, resistance. Like weight distribution had changed abruptly. We were still moving, but the engine sounded strained. Too strained for one body and 2 personnel. 2 minutes from the hospital, the siren cut out. I didn't turn it off. It just died. Dashboard flickered. The radio went silent. Then the interior rear light snapped off. Why are the lights out? The medic shouted. I didn't touch them. In the mirror, I saw movement, not the medic. Behind him, between the cabinets lining the wall, a distortion, like heat shimmer, except it moved against the vehicle's motion. Forward, toward the rear doors. The ambulance lurched violently. I fought the wheel. Stay seated, I yelled. The rear doors slammed once. Hard. We were moving at 50 miles per hour. Those doors are triple latched. They don't move in transit. They slammed again. Entire vehicle shuddered. Stretcher restraints snapped loose, not unclipped. Snapped like something had pulled them free. Secure him, I shouted. The medic was already lunging. The ambulance veered. For a second, I felt weight slam against the back of my seat, like someone had thrown themselves forward from the rear compartment. But the divider window remained closed, locked. I checked the mirror again. The distortion was clearer now, human-sized. Bent forward, pressing against the inside of the rear doors. The doors buckled outward, metal groaning. The ambulance engine died completely. We were coasting. Dead weight. No power steering. No siren. No lights. The vehicle slowed unnaturally fast. Faster than physics should allow. We came to a complete stop in the middle of the road. No skid, no braking, just stopped. Silence filled the cabin, the kind that makes your ears ring. Pulse, I asked. Nothing. The medic didn't respond. I unbuckled and pushed through the divider into the back. The soldier lay flat. Still, no movement. The stretcher straps were torn clean through, not unclipped, frayed, as if twisted violently. The cabinets lining the walls had swung open, supplies scattered, its oxygen tank on the floor. But the medic key was pressed against the rear doors, pinned. Not by a visible force, but by pressure. Like something invisible stood between him and the exit. His boots lifted slightly off the floor. Do you feel that? he whispered. The air was dense, hard to breathe, like altitude compression. I grabbed his vest and pulled. He dropped immediately, as if whatever held him released at the exact moment I intervened. The rear doors banged once more from inside, trying to open outward. I slammed my palm against them. "Stay shut," I muttered. The pressure vanished. Instantly, the interior lights flickered back on. The dashboard beeped. Power restored. The engine restarted on its own, without ignition, without key turn. I stared at the console. The medic crawled back toward the stretcher. "Still no pulse," he said. Flat. Calm. Like nothing had just happened. I checked the clock. 2:54. We completed the transport. Pronounced dead on arrival. Time logged. 2:54. I wrote nothing about the road incident in the report. Mechanical anomaly. Temporary electrical failure. That's what the paperwork reflected. But it didn't end there. 3 nights later, I was assigned another late call. Non-critical transport this time. Stable patient. Minor fracture. As we loaded him into the back, I noticed something. The stretcher locking mechanism felt heavier, like it resisted alignment. I forced it into place. The patient joked about the hour. I didn't respond. We pulled away from the hospital. No siren. Routine drive. Halfway through the base perimeter, the rear lights shut off. Again, the radio crackled with static. The steering wheel tugged left. I felt that same unnatural shift in weight. Only this time, there was no deceased soldier. It's just a conscious patient and one medic. I checked the mirror. Between the cabinets, the distortion, same shape, same height. Leaning forward, watching, not the patient, me. The rear doors rattled. Stretcher straps tightened visibly. Pulling inward, the patient gasped. "They're too tight," he said. The medic tried to loosen them. They wouldn't release. Straps pulled tighter, not crushing, just holding, pinning. I accelerated. I don't know why. Instinct. Distance. Get moving. The engine strained. Then the distortion shifted. Forward, toward the divider window, pressing against it. The glass bowed inward slightly. I slammed my fist against the divider. "Stay back," I said, not to the medic. To whatever was pushing forward, the ambulance lurched, and the pressure stopped. The straps loosened instantly. The rear lights flicked back on. Radio restored. The steering wheel corrected itself. We rolled smoothly the rest of the way. I didn't check the clock until we arrived. 2:56. I requested reassignment after that. They denied it. Staff shortages, operational necessity, military logic. Last week, another demolition training accident occurred. 2:18 dispatch, single casualty, unresponsive. We loaded him, doors closed. I hesitated before pulling away. The medic began compressions. I heard the first thud before we cleared the gate. The stretcher shifted. The straps tightened. The rear doors rattled once. I didn't look in the mirror this time. I kept my eyes on the road. At 2:54, the siren cut out. The engine stalled. The ambulance stopped, dead center of the road. No power, no sound. Behind me is breathing. Measured and calm, not the medics. I felt weight press against the back of my seat. Not violent, not frantic, just present, like a passenger who had finally moved forward. The breathing lingered for exactly 1 minute, then disappeared. Power returned. The engine restarted. The siren resumed. We reached the hospital without further incident. Time of death, 2:54. I've started noticing something in the ambulance bay cameras, 2:36. Before a dispatch calls, a figure stands near whichever vehicle I'm assigned, not blocking, not touching, just waiting beside the rear doors, facing forward, as if ready for transport. We respond to accidents, explosions, training failures, carry soldiers from field to hospital. But sometimes something rides back with us, not to escape, not to attack, just to complete the trip. Because some transports don't end at the hospital doors. Some end at 2:54. And the ride back's never empty.